IVM.
Can shrimp create the jobs that India needs? Can aquaculture be better than overfishing our coastlines? And can tiny shrimp be the cause of jumbo trade disputes? Industrialist and exporter Aditya Dash joins us on this episode of the Pragati Podcast to tell us everything about shrimp, seafood, and aquaculture. Welcome to the Pragati Podcast, a weekly talk show on public policy, economics, and international relations. I am your host, Pavan Srinath. This is the first episode we have without Hamsini Hariharan as my co-host. I'll miss her a lot on this show. The Pragati Podcast isn't going anywhere though. We'll be back here with new episodes every Thursday. India's seafood exports crossed $7 billion a year in 2017-18. That's over 1.3 million tons of seafood, where both the value and the quantity has been growing at 15 to 20% year on year. India exports its seafood primarily to the United States, Southeast Asia, and Europe. Frozen shrimp is the single largest contributor to seafood exports, accounting for 40% of the weight and a full 60% of the dollar earnings. Despite global competition, shrimp exports have been growing at a whopping 30% year on year in both weight and value out of India. At a time when India's exports are dropping, and when India needs to create 20 million plus jobs a year, we certainly need to pay careful attention to the mighty shrimp. Helping us do that is Aditya Dash, who runs Ram's Assorted Cold Storage Limited, a part of the Suryo group of companies out of Bhubaneswar, Orissa. RACL is a vertically integrated frozen shrimp company, and he'll be sharing more about what that really means on this episode. Also joining me as my co-host on this episode is my colleague and returning guest, Anupam Manur. Aditya, by the way, is an alumnus of the GCPP, the Graduate Certificate in Public Policy course at the Takshashila Institution. Psst. Applications are currently open. Go check out takshashila.org.in. We'll be back after this short break.
Hey, it's been another great week on IVM Podcast. If you're not following us on social media, please make sure you do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Our Instagram page is actually pretty interesting. The stories we do are the team and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, and they're pretty kind of fun. Take a look at them. Let us know what you think. This week on Cyrus's guest is writer and journalist Namita Devidayal. She talks about how she got into journalism, her background in Indian classical music, and her upcoming book titled The Sixth String of Vilayat Khan. On The Scene and the Unseen, Amit Verma's guest is a cricket commentator and journalist whose voice most cricket fans can identify. I hope you guessed that it's Harsha Bhogle. He spoke to Amit about the evolution of Indian cricket, its rise, and the changes that he has witnessed over the years. Really, really great episode, and we're really excited to have Harsha on the network. Please definitely check it out. We also launched a brand new show called The Paperback Podcast, hosted by Racheta Sharma and Satyajit Roy. Every week, they'll talk to industry experts about 5 of their favorite non-fiction books. The first episode featuring Apurva Damani of Artha Ventures is out on the 5th. On the Rediscovery Podcast final episode of this season, Ambika and Hosher talk to Pankaj Shah and Sumit Gambhir. They talk food, travel, and the secret ingredients to a decade of managing Indian restaurants. Pankaj and Sumit were also participants in our other show, The Kolaba Cartel, so it'd definitely be a fun conversation and definitely check them out. And with that, let's move on with the shows.
Hi Aditya, welcome to the Pragati Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you with us here in Bangalore.
Thank you, Pavan. It's a great honor to be here.
And Anupam, thanks for joining me as a co-host today. You come here often as a guest.
Yeah.
Today you are a co-host and a discussant.
Yeah, a pleasure.
And Anupam, I want to make it clear to our listeners as well that you're not here just because my voice is in trouble today, but because you are dealing with the economy, with jobs, with trade, and bringing your economics training into the room.
Oh, yeah, that's my belief as well, that there's a slightly better function I provide than just as a backup voice artist.
Aditya, a lot of us have learned a little bit about the challenges of farming today. We know the challenges with land, the challenges that various farmers face, and in general, that is a political issue and a policy issue that gets discussed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
However, we know very, very little about how a shrimp or a fish fillet ends up on our plate.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been looking at this from various angles. You've been actively working in this field. You run a company. So tell us about, so if I'm eating great buttered shrimp in a restaurant in Bangalore. How on earth does that shrimp land up on that plate?
Yeah, the story of the shrimp that you're eating or seafood, you should know that more than 50% of the seafood doesn't come from the sea anymore. It is grown in ponds, through aquaculture.
So it should be called pond food.
Yeah. No, I think seafood still sounds glamorous and, there's nothing different about it. And the story of the shrimp that's in your plate is a very interesting one. Because most likely the shrimp that you're eating is, the Latin name is Penis vename, and it's commonly known as Pacific white shrimp. And as of now, over the last 10 years, it has become the most widely produced shrimp in the world, and hence the most widely consumed shrimp in the world. And so let us start with the life cycle, the shrimp that you've been eating on your plate, before that, for the story of that shrimp, we have to start with the story of the shrimp's mother and father.
Oh, so we have a full-blown Bollywood drama that's coming up. Okay.
Gangs of Wasseypur of the shrimp. So the mother and father have been imported from a shrimp, breeding center. The ones I buy for my hatchery, it's Kona Bay Hatcheries based out of Hawaii. So the mother and father would have been flown in Hawaii to Chennai. In Chennai, there we have a quarantine facility. And from there, after being tested for virus or something, they come to our hatchery in Gopalpuram.
So this is in southern Orissa?
Yeah, Gopalpuram is in South Orissa, near Berhampur. And there the mother and father, they are acclimatized, then they start spawning. So they give Nopli. And from Nopli, we raise them to post-larvae. Post-larvae around 12 days to 19 days.
Oh yeah, these are not vertebrates, right? So this is very different from how we imagine a cow giving birth to a calf or a chicken laying an egg, and this is a different beast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my biology is not that good, but again, I learned it through the business. And the PLs are then given to the farmers, and at the hatchery itself, we'll acclimatize the baby shrimp to the salinity level of the ponds that the farmers have.
Okay.
And then the farmer will, buy the seed from us, the PL, the baby shrimp.
Sorry, what does PL stand for?
Post-larvae.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they will grow it, over a course of 120 days in a pond. And they will feed it also shrimp feed, which we sell to them. And then once it's grown to a marketable size, say 20 grams, 25 grams, we buy it back.
So 20 grams of a shrimp would be how big in size, typically in length?
In length. 20 grams is 50 count, and that's your standard shrimp size. It's a very popular size in the European market and UK market. Why? Because the number one hangover food in UK is what? Shrimp red curry, after a night of heavy drinking. So I think it's about 3-inch, 4-inch, you can say, after. And this is excluding the head, yeah.
Okay.
And that is there. Then we buy the shrimp. The shrimps are bought with the head on, procured from the pond, harvested. One sample will be taken for testing whether the farmer has used any banned antibiotics or not. And then quality parameters are tested. They come to our factories, the processing units. And then, the head will be removed. Then depending on the order, either just it'll go as headless shell on, or sometimes it can go headless, the head would be removed, and it's called peeled and deveined.
Okay.
The shell will be completely removed, and that vein that they have, the vein is actually the alimentary canal. But if you call it vein, it sounds better, more marketable. And I actually, in fact, love eating the head of a shrimp, and although that's where the digestive system is, but it's the most tastiest part.
But that's not very popular among customers?
No, I think only Chinese, Bengalis, and Orias eat it.
Okay.
Yeah. And one is that, or you can have it like a peel, deveined, and tail on, like cocktail shrimp. And depending on that, they will be arranged like that. And frozen, you can have a IQF frozen. Each shrimp will be coated with a layer of ice.
Okay.
Then it will be packed as per the customer's packaging. And then it will be shipped. Maybe it's Costco, maybe it's H Mart in US, maybe somewhere in Canada or European Union or Japan, China, or maybe even Bangalore as the one that Pavan just about to eat.
Okay.
So mainly your customers are big retail stores, which will then they will sell to the end consumer, or is there any other kind of middleman in between?
Yeah, so mostly they're importers, and the importers will sell to both retailers such as Costco or Walmart, and sometimes Walmart they procure on their own also, or like H Mart they procure on their own, or they are food service companies.
Right.
You know, you have Gordon Food Service, you have this another company called Cisco, SYSCO, again one of the big players, and like that, and they in turn will import an entire container load of shrimps, and they will further sell it to another distributor. That distributor will say sell it to a Chinese restaurant or an Italian restaurant or something.
Okay. And there might be people like, I think there's this company called Licious in Bangalore where they might take some frozen shrimp, they might thaw it, and then put a marinade on it, and then sell the marinade such that somebody cooks it at home. Right?
Or like a meal kit.
Yeah, like a meal kit.
Yeah. So a meal kit is definitely there, but I don't think Solicious and all are doing the kind of volumes.
Probably
Yeah.
not. But so this is fascinating, right? Because even when we talk about a potato, like a few years back, we had tried to chase the potato back to the source. So we had gone to the hinterland of Karnataka. But once you pluck it out of the ground, it's a potato, right? And once you put it in the ground, it's a little potato, and then it grows more and so on. And it's the same potato with a little bit of cleaning, a little bit of weighing, some sort of standardization in size. It comes to our mandi, and then from the mandi it comes to distributors. What I find fascinating about this is because you're working with live animals, there's so much quality control and testing that happens throughout.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, just the feeding the hatchery operations are so complex. It has to be a completely biosecure operation area, and then I have to figure out what to feed them. Because the mother and father shrimps, they need a diet of bloodworms, apart from squid and everything.
Wow.
Now, if I'm procuring the bloodworms, I need to ensure that the bloodworms don't have any viruses or anything.
Okay.
So how to disinfect that? So a new method that we have adopted in the industry is we have started making the bloodworms also.
All right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So this is not even like, even if you're thinking of other livestock, right? I mean, we're talking about chickens. Yes, I mean, the chicken industry is now extremely complex, but you still give it reasonably inert feed, right? The feed is typically some sort of a plant-based source. So I guess quality control is easier. Even if you're talking about pork or mutton or even beef, which we should not speak about in India, the feed is largely vegetarian, and you can have some amount of quality control there.
Right.
But here your life is so much more complicated.
Well, these are only for the mother and father prawns because we need to give them on a very good diet so that they can spawn and give me the eggs that I want.
So tell us a little more about this sector in Orissa, in other parts of coastal India. How does it work? What kind of companies do you see? I know that you're a member of a few associations which deal with seafood. Tell us a little more about that.
So yeah, we have the Seafood Exporters Association of India. And you can say over the last 5 years or last 10 years almost, has been a big boom in the seafood trade. Because previously it was a big problem. We were all trying to do the same model, but it was with a native species called the Penis monodon, the black tiger shrimp. But then it was more susceptible to the white spot virus. And it used to result in a lot of disease outbreaks, crop losses. It was a really bad situation. The factories didn't have enough raw material. So then in Nellore, with the guidance and leadership of a few companies and a few very distinguished individuals, they championed, how we should, import this exotic species because there's a Venami, it's a native to American waters, not found here. So then we got that, and it has been a huge success. You've had these homegrown feed companies. If any listener is into stock trading, they would know that one of the best performing stocks has been Avanti Feeds.
Yeah.
So Avanti Feeds is that. So Avanti Feeds, they make the shrimp feed, and I sell their feed. So I take their feed and I sell it to the farmers, and then I buy back the raw material from the farmers. So I'm a distributor for Avanti Feed.
So I just want to kind of get a sense of this entire sector.
Mm-hmm.
So first, if we can start with, how much does your company produce, and just in kind of broad relation of, what kind of a ratio would that be with let's say the biggest producer in the field? So just to get a sense of, how much tonnage of shrimp is being produced.
Mm-hmm. So I do around 4,000 to 5,000 tons a year.
Okay.
Of
Wow.
shrimps. And so that doesn't include the head of the shrimp.
Right.
So you can add another 40% or something.
Okay.
And I'm one of the smaller players. We
Right.
are one of the oldest companies, but as of now, we are small because in the 90s we invested heavily in aquaculture when it was Peneus monodon, and we lost heavily due to that. Then there was the 99 super cyclone, and
Oh yeah.
the
So while we can worry about drought and floods,
Mhm.
you guys don't escape that, right? If a
Yeah, yeah.
cyclone comes and hits
Yeah.
you, it hits your hatcheries as well
Mhm.
and everything.
Yes. And yeah, aquaculture is something, it's a very expensive thing, prawn farming, and you don't get any insurance on it. There's no insurance. So let us calculate, we can do so I'm 5,000 tons a year. So I think the biggest company in Orissa, Falcon Marine Exports, and they would be one of the biggest in India. I think they should be doing around 50,000,
Right. Okay.
yeah, easily 50,000 tons a year.
Okay.
And the industry size should be around, 200 or 500,000 tons, maybe.
Right.
I think it should be 500,000 tons easily.
And this is just for one variety of shrimp.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about seafood, we're
Seafood,
talking
yeah.
about massive quantities, right? So this includes fish of various sort, the basa that comes everywhere that seafood connoisseurs complain about, and a lot of so this is a lot of food that is being generated.
See, you should also let us look at food history. Everywhere around the world, we are consuming chicken, right? But we are consuming that one species of chicken.
Right.
But actually, I mean, you're a biologist, there are so many other wild varieties of chicken, but through breeding and farming and all that, we said this is the most efficient way to produce chicken.
Right.
Same thing happened with pork, same thing with, beef, I think mutton, they haven't really done that. So similar thing is happening with shrimp. I think this is and similar thing is pretty much happening with fish also. I think basa is going to be, like they're saying, paneer of the sea.
Just to get an idea of, again, your customers, in terms of just, do you have kind of a wild breakup of domestic versus international market? How much do you sell to India and how much do you sell to rest of the world? And then which are those countries which probably order the most?
Yeah, so mine is 100% exports.
Oh, you don't?
Yeah, it's a very negligible quantity that I do on a domestic. It'll be less than 1%.
Right, okay.
Because, again, the Indian market is very small to begin with. The purchasing power is not there, or we are not farming shrimp enough to bring down the cost.
Right. So on that count, it's just an interesting thing. Since I'm a vegetarian, I have no clue. I've never ordered shrimp in my life. So in the kind of order of different kind of seafood, how expensive is shrimp compared to, let's say, the basa, which I think is the most popular one?
So, yeah, shrimp will easily be way more expensive than basa. I think a basa, you will be getting something around, say, $2, $3 a kilo. Whereas shrimp will easily be around, say, $7 to $8.
Okay. So, yeah.
And if shrimp was really cheap, you will start seeing it in McDonald's. And the only place I've seen shrimp in McDonald's is in Geneva, one of the richest places in the world.
Right.
So, and that is something you need to understand about food production also in India. Like, you see Domino's, you see McDonald's, you see all these fast food chains, but they all have only chicken in their menu.
Right.
Maybe mutton. Mutton's just slowly inching in.
Right.
And
so we have other problems when it comes to pork or beef.
Yeah, pork and beef. So yeah, don't even get me started.
Can shrimp be halal? Sorry.
Yeah, so shrimp can be halal, I think. I don't really know because we have halal certification, But I'll tell you what shrimp cannot be. Shrimp is not kosher.
Right. Okay.
You know, and in fact, but they still consume shrimp in Israel. And some of my Israeli customers, in fact, they have a company specifically for importing shrimp.
Okay.
And that's all it does. Because they also import a lot of kosher food. And since they are so strict, they're like the company which imports kosher items cannot deal with non-kosher items.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so just again back to yours is all international market.
Yeah. All export.
Which are the countries which import the most from? And I remember you saying that India is the biggest producer of shrimp in the world, one of the biggest at least.
I would say it is definitely the biggest. Yeah, I think we have overtaken China. I don't know the numbers yet, but we are definitely in the top three for sure. Yeah, but
right. And who do we export to the most?
Yeah, so in the suppliers, it's India, China, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Ecuador. These are the big
Right.
players. And whom do we supply to? North America is India's biggest market.
Right.
USA and Canada. But I do a lot of focus on European Union also.
Okay.
Because that's where I get better pricing. And European Union, they have imposed these new testing norms only on Indian shrimps, for testing for antibiotic residues.
Right.
Which I feel is an unfair non-tariff barrier, but I'm still confident about my products. And that's why I continue to sell there. So my second market, or sometimes even some years, my largest market is the European Union. Apart from that, there is China and Japan. And slowly and steadily, I'm exploring the South Korea market.
Oh, okay.
But there are some challenges. The South Korean consumer prefers the shrimp to be of a darker color. Now, and this variety of shrimp, it'll take on the color based on the surrounding. So if you have a dark clayey soil, you will get a dark colored shrimp. But if it's a sandy soil, then it'll be a light colored shrimp, which most the Koreans don't really appreciate.
Amazing.
And
I mean, just the sheer complexity, and it thoroughly makes sense, right? I mean, though it sounds strange because, we like our cucumbers a certain color. People in coastal Karnataka, you have something that can be translated to as painted cucumbers, bannada saute, which is a cooked vegetable as opposed to the cucumber, which is a raw vegetable. So there is, it's not a surprise that there is all this complexity in food habits.
Yeah, but I think, initially when I was new to the industry, like 10, 12 years back, I used to be so frustrated with this, especially when I was doing the wild caught material, from say Chilika or from the sea. So we would catch that, and based on the salinity level, you would get this reddish tinge on the black tigers. But then I would have some American customers say, like, oh, when I ordered 500 Toshiba TVs, they all look the same. So I want all your prawns to look the same. I'm not manufacturing them. Okay, Mother Nature does that.
It's still grown in an artificial environment but you can't control the.
But this is the transition we are seeing everywhere else as well, right? I mean,
all commodities. You go to a supermarket, everything looks the same.
And sometimes the idea of, at least with gourmet food and so on, is that one particular catch in a season in an area having that special quality that certain chefs will prefer.
Yes.
Right? Like with wine. I mean, there's this whole idea of terroir where you have a eucalyptus tree growing in the southeast corner of your vineyard, and therefore there is a certain quality to your wine. But I guess that will be a very premium market, right? And small in size.
And those people will not like farmed shrimp, right? Mostly. They will prefer a sustainably wild-caught shrimp,
Right. We'll be back with Aditya Dash and Anupam Manur after this short break.
Did you know that Parsis in Mumbai, instead of being left at the Tower of Silence after they die, are now cremated? And why? Because a cow fell sick in the early 1990s. Did you know that the smog in Delhi is caused by something that farmers in Punjab do, and that there's no way to stop them? Did you know that there wasn't one gas tragedy in Bhopal, but 3? One of them was seen, but 2 were unseen. Did you know that many well-intentioned government policies hurt the people they're supposed to help? Why was demonetization a bad idea? How should GST have been implemented? Why are all our politicians so corrupt when not all of them are bad people? I'm Amit Verma, and in my weekly podcast, The Seen and the Unseen, I take a shot at answering all these questions and many more. I aim to go beyond the scene and show you the unseen effects of public policy and private action. I speak to experts on economics, political philosophy, cognitive neuroscience, and constitutional law so that the insights can blow not only my mind, but also yours. The Seen and the Unseen releases every Monday. So do check out the archives and follow the show at seenunseen.in. You can also subscribe to the Seen and the Unseen on whatever podcast app you happen to prefer.
Welcome back. So, Aditya, we want to talk to you about various angles on this. One, we want to talk about the jobs and, how the sector works in terms of job creation, because that's one big pressing challenge in India. I think the trade conversations are fascinating. And I think the third is the sustainability and environment conversation. So we'll do them in, no particular order.
Sure.
But let's start with jobs.
Yeah. Thinking about, the kind of employment figures in India and so on, we're trying to explore every avenue which is a potential job creator. And now that if you're particularly, I was kind of taken aback by this, that India is the largest shrimp producer in the world, which also would mean that it does employ a certain number of people, right?
Huge.
And if especially this is also a growing industry, then it again has a potential to create jobs. So again, let's start with your company and give me an idea of how many people would you employ and at what stages of production as well.
So as far as my processing units are concerned, both the direct and indirect employment would be a total of 500 employees.
Okay.
Because you have to take into account that this is a very labor-intensive process.
Precisely the kind that we are looking for.
Yeah, because, you need people to take the head off. You need the...
That's a manual job?
Yeah.
Okay.
So each factory will have easily some 200 to 500 women working there. And it's all women oriented.
Fantastic. So, this seems to be like the answer we're looking for. Okay, it's a labor-intensive industry which employs women. Fantastic.
Yes, I've been saying that to the government for so long, and so even removing all the shell and everything, all that's all women oriented. And in fact, when my father first started the factory in Paradeep in Orissa, that time we used to get the workers. The women would come from Kerala.
Wow.
To work. And, some women were flown in from Japan also because we had collaboration with Japanese companies. And they would tell them how to peel the shrimp in the correct, sushi way or something.
Right.
And but
so this
now,
is not necessarily just a low-skill job, right?
No.
You need talent.
You have to teach them that.
And all, at the same time, you have to maintain high hygiene standards.
Hygiene standards and all very high. And from 80s to now, the situation is most of the seafood factories in Kerala are employing women from Orissa.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Because, I don't think so you'll find, cost-effective labor from Kerala. And
so this is 500 people just in the processing part.
Yeah.
For about 5,000 tons a year. So if you're looking for a metric, that is one job per 10 tons a year. Yeah. But that's at one level. What about upstream of this? So you talked about the father and the mother shrimp. From there on,
in the hatchery itself, the hatchery is not that labor-intensive process. Like my hatchery, it's only I think 15 at the most.
Okay.
I still have a union though. I don't know why. Again, this is what you get when you operate in a communist area.
So 15 people in a hatchery.
Yeah.
And then it goes to the farmers, right?
Yeah. So now the farmers is where it's very interesting. So my network of farmers is 3,000 farmers roughly.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah. And so total shrimp farmers in Orissa would be easily around 30,000 to 50,000 is my estimate.
Okay.
But if we ask the government authorities, they'll say 10,000. I'm like, are you kidding me? 10,000? I think that's just one big company's adopted farmers are 10,000. But so you can say 50,000 shrimp farmers in Orissa.
And how does that work, Aditya? Like, we know that with again, land-based farming, there's a seasonality and so on. So when somebody is a shrimp farmer and they have a plot of aquaculture, what's the size of an aquaculture unit and how does that work?
So it depends on area to area. So Orissa and West Bengal consist of mostly smallholder farming, less than 1 acre or 1 acre to maximum 2 acre.
Okay.
And a lot of these people, they were earlier doing paddy, rice cultivation in anyway saline areas. So they were having a tough time doing rice. So that way shrimp is a big boon in disguise for them. I mean, a boon, a blessing. And but the main thing that they lack is what the farmers in Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu have is access to capital.
Okay.
For reasons, I don't know, it's a very complicated answer, which I still don't know the answer. There is a lot of capital available in coastal Andhra Pradesh, in the Krishna Godavari Delta.
Right.
You go through it, all kinds of crops are done in a very professional manner. So, and that's why Andhra Pradesh is the biggest producer of shrimp in India.
Okay.
Like, I think Andhra Pradesh probably accounts 60% or 70% of India's production.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's no reason why Orissa and West Bengal cannot produce those numbers, or at least match up to it.
Right.
But the biggest reason is lack of access to capital. So
compared to paddy, then say if you have 2 hectares of shrimp, what's the life cycle like? So
yeah, so
tell us about a year in a shrimp farmer's life.
Yeah, so a crop would be around 90 to 120 days.
Okay.
And in Orissa and West Bengal, they will do 2 crops. Now, depending on which part of Orissa and West Bengal you are located, that will either be a summer crop and a rainy crop, or a rainy crop and winter crop.
All right.
So the summer crop will be, say, March, April, May, and the rainy crop will be June, July, August, something like that. And the winter crop will be, September, October, November, and mix and match like that. But they won't do 3 crops. Andhra Pradesh and further south, mostly they go for 3 crops because the temperature is a lot warmer during the winter time. Because winter time you can still grow the shrimps, but then you won't get a good rate, because end of the day we have to do, this is all about efficiency, right? You are feeding them protein and you're converting protein. So this is all about feed conversion ratio.
Okay.
Right. So that is always tracked. And if you are doing that in the winter, then they are taking the feed, but they don't grow in size.
Right. They need the feed just to survive.
Just to survive, yeah.
So on a typical 1 or 2 hectares land that on aquaculture that we're speaking about, how many farmers are kind of have to work on that?
Yeah, so it'll be usually it's just one farmer or his family. They stay there.
Right.
Yeah, and either it's someone's land or it's their own land, or the rice farmer. He's just made an arrangement with usually a financer, and the financer like, what were you making in paddy? I'll give you 1.5 times, 2 times that. Yeah, you go, let me do my thing. And then he digs the pond, and then there's another one, and like a sharecropper, you can say. And everything is financed for him. This is the Orissa West Bengal model. And, so the cost of construction would be, digging the pond, then, filling it up with water. You need generators if there's no electricity. Even if there's electricity, like Orissa government, they give electricity at 1 rupee per unit. Which is an excellent rate, but there's no electricity.
Yeah.
So, and then you have aerators. They are these paddle wheel aerators, and they will create bubbles. So that increases the dissolved oxygen levels. And, then the input cost is the baby shrimps, the seed, and the feed. And then there are other supplements, minerals, probiotics. Those are the things. And finally, during harvest time, you have these freelance crew of harvest laborers. They come and harvest it.
All right. Okay. So typically, would you say that farmers in aquaculture would be more productive in that sense? At least that's the feeling I'm getting than in traditional kind of land-based agriculture.
What do you mean when you say productive?
I mean, the amount you produce per person.
And income you get.
Yeah, income you get. Because we know that in traditional agriculture, one of the biggest problems is this, what you call as disguised unemployment. I mean, there's many more people employed supposedly in a farm, but they're actually not contributing towards the final output at all. So productivity is extremely low in that sense. So
rather, if I can also, add context, that means that a lot of people who are, say, recognized by the government as farmers are actually earning their keep doing things unrelated to the farm. So in that sense, can you give us a sense of whether with shrimp farming, is it an intensive activity for the farmers? And is it a good return compared to paddy and other options that they have?
Yes, much better. Again, I haven't done a whole systematic analysis, but I think around 6 years back, I was making a tour of the shrimp farming regions, because with this German company that wanted to promote organic shrimp farming. And then I was discussing with them, and a lot of them were former paddy farmers. And, there was this one story that I keep repeating in interviews. And he said, when I was doing paddy, I used to wear a lungi. And, then this was my, I didn't have a concrete house. But now I have a 3-storied concrete house. I wear shirt and pant. I drive a motorcycle. I got my daughter married off. So there's there. But the farmer, if you are measuring in terms of money, definitely. In terms of productivity, again, that is something I tell, my farmers. You are not competing with the farmers of Andhra Pradesh. You are competing with the farmers in Thailand.
Right.
You're competing with the farmers in Vietnam, in Ecuador. Now, Ecuador itself has a completely different model. Like the average farm size in India is 1 acre, 2 acre. The smallest farm in Ecuador would be 200 acres.
Right.
Wow.
It's a complete plantation model.
Right. The scale of it is entirely different.
Yeah. So, that is there. But productivity also, I think still Thailand is a completely very productive. But I don't know if it's politically correct to say it. Hamare paas poverty hai, and that is a competitive advantage. And I think it's good, because this is a way where people, they earn more income, and this is how they get out of poverty.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I mean, if labor costs are lower,
Yeah.
I mean, this was why a lot of information technology came to India at one point. So when labor costs are low and when people are suffering so much that even shrimp farming can provide a better form of employment, then that's definitely a good thing.
So that's the 2 stages that we spoke about. One is the actual farmers, and then again included in that is the harvesters and so on, and then there's the processing unit. Any other kind of stages of production itself, and any other backward and kind of forward linkages which exist, which can provide employment?
Then say ancillary industries and all that, again, all this farming and all, like we didn't talk about a feed factory.
The feed factory, yes. Yeah.
So that also generates a lot of employment, not just a feed factory. And most of the feed companies actually end up playing the roles of banks.
Okay.
Yep. See, because you go to the average PSU banker or a private banker, he doesn't want to give it to a farmer with a 1 acre land, and he's like, okay, show me the lease agreement. And that guy will say, sir, it's a verbal agreement. I've told the guy, he's from my same village. So, but they would much rather finance a guy like me or some other corporate entity. Like, okay, set up a big factory and a working capital limit. But for the farmer to do it, he needs to be financed by someone, right?
Right.
So that's where the feed company comes in. That's where companies like me, we come in. And we provide them.
Right. Okay.
So in that sense, Aditya, we are talking about, say, 5,000 tons of shrimp production and close to 4,000 jobs or so that are being created, if not a little more, right? A conservative estimate of the farmers, the people in the processing unit and in the hatcheries and people who are creating the feed and so on. Very conservative number is about 4,000 to 5,000.
I think so. And I remember a consultant telling me, and he's a very famous person in the aquaculture industry. And in Gujarat, I think they did a study. And they said 1 hectare of shrimp farming creates 10 jobs.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. How many hectares they are, I don't know. So,
yeah, but 1 hectare of paddy farming will not create 10 jobs. We do know that.
Yeah.
From an employment generation perspective, this is very interesting. I mean, if we can, for example, think of going from the 500,000 tons to a million to 2 million, then how many more extra kind of jobs that can be created? I mean, that's essentially what I'm going to be then thinking about and working on.
Yeah, and now since we are in the job thing, another thing that has been completely overlooked is how India hasn't emerged as a destination for seafood processing.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
let's say salmon, is very widely consumed. And where is it produced? It's produced in rich countries, Norway and all that. So you can't make fillets there. So instead, what happens? They exported to China for further processing and then sent around the world. So why can't India do that? Now, I think the Marine Product Export Development Authority, they have been championing this, and some of it does happen, like shrimps from wild-caught red shrimps from Argentina. They do come to Cochin, Kerala, and they get further processed and sent across the world.
So it makes more sense for those shrimp to travel to Kerala for processing than getting processed wherever they were caught.
In Whole Foods, New York, I have seen so-called sustainable wild-caught Mexican shrimp, which has been caught in Mexico, frozen, shipped to Thailand, reprocessed, and then brought back.
So not really all that sustainable, is it?
I mean, I think the carbon footprint is huge.
Yeah.
But tell us a little about this, right? So this is, whenever we talk about aquaculture, the big concern comes from, but what's happening to the environment? What's happening to that land? There is so much salt, so much feed, so many things that are being added that the soil is getting ruined and so on. But how would you address that?
Yeah, so I think in the 90s, especially in India and in states like Orissa, the opposition was a lot more organized and strong than, say, in a state like Andhra Pradesh. I think, which is a good thing. I think because the civil society network in Orissa is a lot stronger. We have a better ecosystem of conservationists, researchers, etc. Sometimes it can be a bad thing, but it's better to be on the safer side. So let's start with the main thing would be, effluents, the effluent from shrimp farming. So what does this effluent contain? I mean, this effluent will contain excess amount of nitrogen. Right. And if they are just being put into the streams or something, it can cause eutrophication, or you will see, dead zones, etc. I think as of now, again, I don't know if a study has been done. It has not reached critical levels yet, because otherwise we would see some environmental reports about that. But it is something we need to start addressing now.
Before it reaches a critical level.
Yes, because, the boom time is over. So now what will the farmer do? The farmer's been making huge money, the last 5 years. They've been making 100% markup profits. And, but now as the prices are going down and down, because again, it's not just the farmers in India who are making a lot of money, farmers around the world. So everyone got into this game. And more and more intensification will happen. As more and more intensification is happening, the effluent becomes more polluted. So one way to go about it is third-party certification. Like our corporate farm is certified. We have this BAP certification, which stands for Best Aquaculture Practice.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Then there is another called ASC, which stands for Aquaculture Stewardship Council. It was started by WWF. So these are one of the things. I think you have government rules and regulations also. And again, we need more manpower. And one of the things I've noticed, like we all say that India has a big government or something. A lot of people tend to say that, but I think it's the opposite. We have the smallest government compared to the population we have, the police ratio or the amount of, fisheries department personnel. So that is it. So effluent is one thing.
Aditya, this is fascinating for me because, the effluent question is one that we often pose for industries, right? So if you're leaving anything out, whether you're a Coca-Cola factory, which became a big political thing at one point, or you're any other industry body, you follow certain norms whereby you ensure that whatever you let out has a certain set of properties that are not too damaging. On the other hand, you have regular farming where there is a lot of nitrogen that goes out because we use excessive urea. Urea is subsidized by the government, and we don't have a mechanism to control that. Right? I mean, we know about excess nitrogen coming in from all kinds of farming. But what you're telling me is very interesting, where aquaculture is in part being treated almost as a quasi-industry, even though you don't have big industrial scaffolding and, fumes and vents and all that, where some of these standards are coming in, right?
Yeah.
So you straddle that little world. And so that is one part, I guess, of both the environment question and I'm guessing for the farmer, a long-term sustainability question, right? Because he has to use the same plot of land to grow shrimp year on year. And if that land becomes less usable 10 years later, then that's a problem, right?
So, yeah, very good points you've raised. So, as far as the effluent problem is concerned, for big corporate farms like ours, we have a 60-acre farm and we have a 300-acre farm. We have the effluent treatment tanks and ponds and everything. So, it's not a problem for us. And we need to have that to get these certifications. But for the smallholder, I mean, he already has just one pond to begin with. So where's this going to be his effluent treatment pond? So right now, from my observation, it's not, again, very systematic or thorough. What I've seen is that they have gotten together. It'll be a bunch of 5 to 10 farmers, and they would have pooled the resources and made one effluent treatment pond. Because you have to see that, a lot of the farming that's being done, besides the shrimp farms, you also have, existing paddy culture. Now, the paddy farmer is also, he's a very, jealous guy because he's having a miserable existence doing just paddy. And then, for the slightest pretext, it'll lead to a big conflict because he's seeing the shrimp farmer,
Yeah, and
probably,
and if the shrimp farming has an externality that the paddy farmer has to face with, that's a conflict. In fact, I remember reading a paper a long time ago about whether you can capture that externality as a payment between shrimp farmers and paddy farmers. Of course, that might be a good economics exercise. I don't know how it works in reality.
I don't think it'll work in reality.
But what you're saying is there is conflict management happening in that manner.
It does. In a, you can say not really a formal way, but in a very informal way, it is happening.
Okay.
Because again, it is a very important cash crop thing. It is cash generating. So
apart from effluents, what are the other large environmental concerns?
The other thing, like you said, was the pond itself might be going, because after 2 crops, what we do is we treat the pond bottom for the excess nitrogen. And now the new modern technique, how to do it is you have a central drainage and you cover the entire pond with, some polythene sheets. That's a new system of doing it. So that is there. And then the next big sustainable question is about what are we feeding the shrimps? You can't say that farm is better if end of the day you are feeding them, fish and other items caught from the sea.
Right.
What's the use of farming then? So, the use of fish meal, so that is there. So you have these standards for the feed mills also, the sustainability standards. As of now, it's about sourcing a fish meal from certified FAO zones, etc., maintain your traceability records, all that thing, how to combat illegal, unregulated, unauthorized fishing. Then, in response of such a demand for sustainable shrimp, there have been a lot of innovations in feed. One is substituting insect meal instead of fish meal.
Okay.
So you use the larvae of African soldier fly or something. And you use that as a protein source instead of fish meal. It's still in experimental stage.
Wow.
That is one. I think Cargill has developed a technology how to make protein from methane. And then you have algae-based technologies also, you make protein from algae culture and do that. So yeah, all these innovations are definitely there. Because
so while we are talking about food coming from things like fungi and so on, they may not happen directly, but they might be what gets fed to shrimp and fish and other things.
I mean, I might not eat insects or something, but I think I'm okay with if the shrimp I'm eating has eaten those.
Absolutely.
Things, yeah. What are the big kind of ethical considerations in this thing as well? I'm sure. I mean, I was squirming a little bit when you were talking about breaking off the shrimp's head and removing his thing, but that's me. As an industry, or what are you most attacked about as an industry in terms of the big ethical questions?
Well, there are the sustainable issues that we just discussed, the environmental pollution and, the sustainability of the feed ingredients itself.
Right.
That is one. Then again is labor standards.
Okay. Yeah.
There are allegations specifically against Thailand and Vietnam, about the processing units are not, adhering to labor standards. Because in Thailand, again, because of, such a level of prosperity and development, most of the people, working in these Thai shrimp factories are migrant workers from Myanmar.
Oh, okay.
Who tend to be, who it's alleged, I can't say, but, there was a whole Pulitzer Prize winning story about slave labor being used in boats that supply fish meal to these shrimp processing plants.
Wow.
To shrimp feed plants, sorry. But, those are things. These are allegations, and you can definitely say that the shrimp industry would mean a lot to a small country like Thailand, Vietnam, and Ecuador because it's so labor intensive, earns foreign exchange. But for a big country and a big economy like India, I mean, we don't have the clout like the steel lobby or some other important industry does. And that is what I, market myself, and the Indian shrimp as. I was talking to a German customer and I said, the labor abuses that make it to the press every now and then, you can't get away doing that in India.
Right.
Slave labor, you can't really have that in the Indian boats. Because we are a democracy, we have a free press. And the very basic thing is it's not like the shrimp industry has that much clout.
Right.
And there is a great parallel I see here even with the coffee industry. Like if you look at coffee, I think from Brazil and Vietnam and so on, the way coffee is grown in those countries is you strip a hill of everything just to grow coffee plants. And so you get an extremely high yield. Your coffee yield is immense. But most of the coffee grown in India is still shade grown. So there are large trees with canopies. So there are these coffee plants below it, but so their yield is obviously much lower, and yield increase in India is always a challenge. But because this coffee ecosystem is still far more dynamic and vibrant, there are all kinds of trees that are growing within it. While our yields might be lower, there might be other challenges. It is fundamentally more sustainable, environmentally friendly, and just works a little better.
And there's a market for all those products.
Right. Yeah. And that's the other important part, right? We should be willing to pay a premium. If we as a customer don't care, then nothing is going to change.
Even all those certifications you were speaking about, ultimately it depends on whether the customer cares for those or not. And if you're exporting it, the customer cares, and then you have that premium value, and they pay extra for that. If not, it would just be you could do whatever you want, get away with it up to some extent, and with the bare kind of minimum that you have to do to follow the law. But beyond that, it's about what the market expects and what the market wants.
We'll be back with Aditya Dash and Anupam Manur after this short break.
How aware do you think you are of your laws and rights? Do you look up to laws when you are caught up in situations? Do you know what your rights are when you're stuck somewhere bad? Well, here's a show that can help you move an inch closer to being aware of what your rights are. Tune into Know Your Qanoon with me, Amber Rana. This is a podcast meant to answer all your law-related queries. Catch Know Your Qanoon every week on the IVM website or the app or anywhere you get your podcast from.
Welcome back.
So let's kind of move on to trade and because my kind of interesting thing, and this is right from the beginning what you were talking about, certain standards and so on. So how much of the quality checks that you do is because of, A, it's the best thing to do for you, and B, how much is it just purely for compliance sake when you're exporting to, let's say, the US or Europe?
So, I mean, it can't be just compliance level, right? You have to do it as part of your own company strategy because you have to figure out the problems and detect the problems out here in India rather than it being detected in Europe or US, because then you have to bring the container back.
Right.
So that being said, I would say I've had 4 rejections, and 4 rejections has been due to packaging errors.
Right, labeling requirements.
Like I have 2 factories. One is called 370, one is 335. One's just out of only 10 cartons in a container of 2,600 cartons were labeled 335 instead of 370, and it was my bad luck that the inspector chose those 10 only. And then I had to get it back, and similar mistakes like that. One, salmonella detection, and what actually spurred the salmonella detection was, first they said it was they found a rat hair. So I thought this is impossible. There's no way you would find a rat hair in my product. So then they further analyzed it. They said, okay, it was a broken leg of a mosquito.
Okay.
So these are the standards I have to
Right.
Wow.
adhere to. Yeah. So where even a broken leg of a mosquito is not acceptable.
Yeah. So I can imagine that a whole set of the quality checks you do is purely, I mean, it makes complete economic sense to do so.
Mhm.
If there's a stray strand of virus that gets in, it can really destroy the entire crop and
Mhm.
thus...
And also reputation, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there'd be huge losses that way. Yeah. Reputational cost is probably even more because it's going to affect you in the future as well.
Which is very different from some potato I buy from a food market, because who knows what that potato is, and it's not like there's a label on the potato, right? So very different with shrimp. But tell us how this trade works. So, of course, one is the actual physical movement of these things. And so in Orissa, do you have enough dockyard and enough sort of infrastructure for you to be able to ship these out well?
Nothing. We have nothing. No shrimp is exported out of Orissa ports. They're all exported. 80 to 90% would be from Vizag,
Oh, really?
and maybe 10 to 20% from Calcutta.
So you have to pay, or rather, the cost of
Hmm.
shipping things. No, rather,
First, domestic transportation.
domestic transportation.
You have to pay for that as well, and then comes... Okay.
Yeah.
And that gets added to the price in some sense. Not
I
all
think
of
the
it, but... yeah.
Orissa exporters could easily save a lot of money. I think the industry could save 100 crores if, say, the Paradeep port had a reefer container facility. And I think there might be other issues also, like maybe the ships are not coming to Paradeep because not only just they need shrimps, they need all kinds of other container cargo, which Vizag can give them.
Okay.
And one thing about trade, again, I want to talk about is I feel that currently there's a lot of non-tariff barriers.
Yeah.
Like currently the main issue right now is antibiotic residue.
Right.
So as far as shrimp is concerned, and aquaculture, EU says that no antibiotic is permissible.
Right.
So firstly, okay, from a scientific point of view, okay, are they going a bit too strict on this? Is it reasonable? I think that needs to be challenged. Second is, why have different standards? Why not? Why is it, zero tolerance for shrimp, but tolerable up to this much for chicken, tolerable up to this much for some other things?
And then there are countrywide variations as well. You were saying something about
exactly.
specific kind of regulations for India, and then there's other kinds of regulations for this thing. So what we have noticed, I teach a class on trade and trade barriers and so on. So we've been noticing that tariffs have been reducing, and that's because of WTO and all these rules and so on. As in until Trump did his magic, but I'm saying before that. But the non-tariff barriers have always been on a rise, right? So you've got there's this interesting kind of comparison of how many days does it take that you have to be at the border before you can actually enter into the country, and how many signatures and documents that are required, right? So typically ease of doing business for trade, if you can imagine. So and Europe is quite notorious for in certain sense because of just the amount of regulations that are there. Even the labeling requirement is probably the hardest to kind of comply with. So just give us a bit more of what else do you experience? One is the antibiotic strain that you were talking about.
Yeah, and something like, I think, South Korea, the import duty for shrimps in South Korea, for Vietnam I think it's 14%, for Thailand it's 16%, for India it's 18%. There's that, and Vietnam has again outwit us, especially in this industry. I think Vietnam EU free trade deal is going to go through by end of this year or next year. That's one. And there was the other one. What was the one with Vietnam, Japan, and US, Australia, and all that, which Trump pulled out of?
Right. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP.
Yeah. So I actually like Trump for doing that, just for solely selfish reasons.
So in that sense, whenever India is seriously pursuing a free trade agreement with any country, that is something of great interest to you, right?
Any country that buys shrimp, yes.
That buys shrimp, yeah.
Definitely. But how do you see that process? So would the industry association around seafood and so on be able to talk to the government about their needs, about free trade? I mean, ideally, anyone who's exporting should be a champion of free trade, right? But how does that happen in practice in India?
In practice, I don't think so. It's happening like that. I think it's more of we've taken a firefighting approach. It's more like run to the government authorities, like, look, sir, anti-dumping duties in US, antibiotic regulation in EU, Japan in the middle had some other kind of ethoxyquin issue, lack of market access in South Korea. So it's like that. And I think definitely a proactive approach is needed. And that is why I urge everyone in my industry to, be more familiar with public policy, sign up for this GCPP course, if not a shrimp exporter, if you're any agriculture product exporter or anything. So
always appreciate the plug. No, but tell us about these trade disputes a little more. Antibiotic was one thing, but what's this business about countervailing duties and so on?
Oh, anti-dumping duties. Yeah. So, okay. So now what happens, you have a lot of the traditional, you've seen, now when I say I'm into shrimp, what does everyone say? Like, oh, like Forrest Gump.
Baba Gump shrimp.
Yeah, Baba Gump shrimp. So everyone, so America has this traditional, the Gulf of Mexico fishermen, and they have been the shrimpers. So, and that is what? That is wild caught shrimp. And, you go around the sea, you catch it, and then you process it, and then you're paying American minimum wage to remove the head and everything. So that's going to be pretty expensive shrimp.
Right.
And there's no way you can compete with farmed shrimp.
Right.
Which takes a lot of less inputs and energy to produce in the first place. And then we have such a low cost of labor. So you have this thing called the Southern Shrimp Alliance, who are a coalition of shrimp boat owners, shrimp processors based in southern United States. And they have alleged that, countries like India and Thailand, Vietnam, Ecuador, that we are selling shrimp below cost price.
But that's not exactly what is happening at all. I mean, it's not below cost price because it's...
Yeah, of course it's not. Otherwise, I wouldn't be...
Yeah, you do make a profit, right?
Yeah.
But this has been the trend that the US has been doing for a very long time.
Yeah,
if it doesn't like a particular product coming in and there's a very strong lobby, they put anti-dumping duties because that's acceptable to the WTO. Now, you can fight it.
It takes 25 years, yeah.
Yeah, and imagine fighting the US at WTO.
Yes.
Anupam, sorry, I'm not a trade guy. I'm not a macroeconomist guy. So I want this simplified a little. So what they're alleging is that, one, their product is obviously expensive, but they're saying that you are dumping shrimp to drive them out of business. Is that sort of the claim?
Yeah.
So you're selling below cost.
So hence, to compensate for that,
They put,
I need to pay 2%, 3%, sometimes it's got 10%.
As an anti-dumping duty.
Yes.
So that you create a notional level playing field between them and you. So walk us through the mechanics of this. So they make this claim and then the American government believes them, sort of the trade ministry or something, and the trade secretary, someone in the US takes this. Where do they take this?
So they anyway had a voting block to begin with.
Okay.
And then after that, what was that oil spill in Louisiana? The huge one?
The BP oil spill.
After the BP oil spill, they got a huge settlement. So now, armed with the Shakti of lobbying power, now the American government is very, very convinced.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So when the American government wants to do this, so one, they can unilaterally say, I will impose this anti-dumping duty.
Yeah, and then India can take it to World Trade Organization. Then it'll take 20, 25 years, and then they make a ruling. I think like the first WTO ruling took 25 years,
Yeah.
right, for bananas.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, fighting the US at WTO is you're entering the match handicapped.
Okay.
And Trump is, I think, further doing that. I mean, that's another trade issue. We can talk about that later.
Okay. So this is anti-dumping. There's also something about countervailing duty.
So there was a countervailing duty. I think that got sorted out.
Okay.
So they withdrew it.
What's a countervailing duty?
So countervailing duty in theory is, duties imposed by the country where the goods are imported to compensate for the fact that there are subsidies from the exporting country.
Okay.
So the US would imagine that Indian government is giving subsidy to a product, and if we are exporting that because we are artificially kind of lowering the price at which something is exported, they put a countervailing duty.
Again, for some level
to try and level the playing field.
So how does this get resolved? Do you have to prove that the subsidy was not given or that the playing field is level?
They have annual reviews and all that. But what the impact it does have is, it makes accessing the US market very difficult. You have to have a lot of cash. You have to open a lot of bonds, with the US customs. And for that to open those standby LCs, I need to give fixed deposits, to Indian banks out here. So
ultimately your margins get much thinner.
Kind of, but I don't mind it also because then it's kind of like a barrier to entry
for others.
Right. So because you've gone in.
Yeah, because I've gone in. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not complaining anymore.
No, this is typical for a lot of agricultural products that goes from India. Standard kind of, one of the reasons why EU and India don't have a free trade agreement is because we accuse the EU of putting far too many, giving too much subsidy to the dairy. And they accuse us of doing the same with our agriculture. And there's something that we've not been able to kind of settle on for the last 25, 30 years at least.
Okay. So in general, when two countries have these kinds of disputes, one, they can try and resolve it themselves, or they can go fight it out in the WTO, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
Are those the two mechanisms available?
Or the third option is that, of course, industry bodies can speak to each other, right? So if there's a powerful lobbying group, then you can, and there's a powerful lobbying group here, then you can just kind of sort it out between the two.
Okay. And of course, there's risk of collusion,
then that gets into other kinds of murky territory, but that's the regulators'
global
problem.
shrimp cartel, that's what I mean.
Wow. So with the shrimp that comes to my dinner table at a restaurant, there's a lot of complex politics, geoeconomics, and more that is happening.
All right, Aditya, final question. What would be your wish list from A, the Indian government, and B, let's say, the entire international landscape?
Okay, my first wish from the Indian government would be, you have a lot of salt pan lands available which are not being utilized. And it's under Ministry of Commerce. So how about we formulate a policy and we can start doing aquaculture in this land that is just lying unutilized.
All right.
So that would really boost, aquaculture production, and it's just idle asset. It's not doing anything.
So it's not like that's paddy land that's being converted. These are salt pans.
It's just abandoned salt pan land.
And what would it take for that kind of conversion to happen? Just a change of policy, or are there real costs attached to it?
No, Ministry of Commerce has to direct the salt commissioner. Salt commissioner has to take a call.
So we need a new salt satyagraha, but this is the shrimp satyagraha.
Yes, exactly.
All right, that's a great wish.
Okay.
Then the usual, roads and electricity everywhere.
So these are hygiene factors, right? Better infrastructure, better roads, continuous access to electricity.
Have your fisheries department fully, staffed.
And let them understand actually the fisheries, how fisheries work and how the industry works.
Yeah. And in fact, as an industry player, and we in the industry, we want it also. We want an Inspector Raj. We want, the government officers to go around shrimp farms, inspect, see if they're using banned antibiotics or not.
Be careful what you wish for.
Then at least we can say, government is regulating it.
Right.
Because right now what the thing is, they're putting all the onus is on the exporter. and say, how do I control 3,000 farmers? And I can barely control them to pay me back my money. So how can I say stop using antibiotics?
That's interesting.
So government needs to do more. Always government could be doing more.
So what this means is the onus of regulation cannot be entirely on the industry.
Yes.
But the government has a strong regulatory role to play
Yeah.
and needs more capacity in that sector.
Yes, because I think, and most of the regulations being done by the central government. You have the Marine Product Export Development Authority and the Export Inspection Agency. Let's get the state governments involved also and let them take a proactive approach. Right now they're treating it like a stepmotherly attitude, like, well, that is part of EIA. It's not our job. Right?
And with I guess many states with large coastlines,
Mm-hmm.
this can be something which in the medium term can give dividends in terms of the economy,
employment,
and a lot more, right?
Mhm.
And it can be hopefully a more politically salient issue over time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, whether we have good solutions or not, we talk about and think about farmers. And I don't think that treatment is
Mhm.
the same when it comes to the seafood
Just-
industry.
Itemizing this on the agenda is,
Mhm.
I think, probably the first bit, right?
Yeah, and that is something I have been pleased, because 12 years back when I joined the business, no one would even talk about this industry. I don't know, for reasons best known to them. Now at least, like say in Orissa itself, this is a focus sector. They've at least started talking about it.
Right.
So yeah, the future looks bright.
Okay.
So
Wish
see.
list number 3.
Another wish list would be if anyone listening to this can crunch the numbers and give the carbon footprint for 1 kilogram of beef versus 1 kilogram of frozen shrimp from India.
Right.
Because shrimp has a much better feed conversion ratio compared to beef.
Right. And also then, if the numbers are in favor of shrimp,
Yeah, eat more shrimp.
yeah, eat more shrimp.
Aditya, thank you so much for coming on the Pragati Podcast and educating us a lot about a part of India's economy that we know very little of. We are landlubbers at the end of the day. But like you said at the beginning, shrimp is not just coming from the sea, but it's coming from aquaculture and from our land.
Right.
Thank you so much, Aditya. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Thank you for staying with us till the end. What did you think of the show? Send us your thoughts to podcast@thinkpragati.com and follow us at thinkpragati on Twitter and on Facebook. Last week's episode, that is episode 71, on the 26/11 terrorist attacks was the last episode with my wonderful co-host Hamsini Hariharan. Hamsini and I started recording this podcast back in April 2017, and it has been a very rich and rewarding journey since then. Last week's episode on the 26/11 terrorist attacks was the last episode with my wonderful co-host Hamsini Hariharan. Hamsini and I started recording this podcast back in April 2017, and it has been a rich journey together since then, hosting the show week on week on week. Thank you, Hamsini, for working with me to figure out what podcasting even is and for making the show what it has become today. I hope to continue on, aided when possible by my colleagues at Pragati and the Takshashila Institution. I hope Hamsini can return to the Pragati podcast as a guest before too long, and regardless, you have not heard the last of her podcasting, I can assure you of that. You can subscribe to the Pragati podcast on the IVM podcast app or any other podcast app. We are there everywhere. And in case you use Apple Podcasts or iTunes to listen to us, please leave us a rating and a review. I would really appreciate it.
Advertising is dead. Yep, you heard me right. Advertising is dead. We're all in the content business now. Let's not call it news, TV, radio, etc., etc. It's all content, and we're in the middle of this weirdly exciting phase where all the borders and lines that have been drawn over decades has been swept away by this lovely thing called the internet. We're a show where we don't dwell on just the stuff that is now, but rather the wider stuff about advertising, media, content, and the whole goddamn circus surrounding it. Tune in every Tuesday for our weekly unboxing of the mystery box we used to call advertising. I'm Varun Dugirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, and this is my new podcast, Advertising is Dead.
Who said healthy food is boring? Who said raw veggies is just salads? Who said eating fats makes you fat? Look forward to my recommendations on healthy food and exercise hacks on the Kinetic Living podcast with me, Coach Urmi, every Wednesday on the IVM app, website, and anywhere you get your podcast from.